DaVo here from the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located inside lovely Skin Kitchen in Des Moines, Iowa. Coming up next, episode number 3 of Body Piercing Basics, the third installment on vocabulary. And this time we're going to cover jewelry. So stick around. So here's some basic vocabulary terms that you're going to come across with jewelry. The first one being gauge. Gauge is the thickness of the jewelry, meaning that how thick that wire is, that actually passes through the piercing. Now, with gauge, it's based on the American wire gauge, which is confusing. The larger the number, the thinner the jewelry is. So, for example, 14 gauge is going to be thicker than 20 gauge, which is what most ear piercing jewelry is. For example, 14 gauge is thicker than 18 gauge. So the larger the number, the thinner the jewelry is. Width. When we're talking about width, we are talking about the distance between one side of the jewelry to the other side. It's always the inside. With rings, it's inside of one side of the ring to the other side of the ring. With barbells, it is from the inside of the ball to the other ball, regardless if it's curved. If it's circular, of course, it's the inner diameter of the circle. So that's what width is. Labret or Labret. Usually called Labret or Labret Studs. And Labret always sounds weird to me. That's why I normally say Labret. A labret is like a barbell. It's a post piece of jewelry with a flat disc on one side and then a post protruding from it with a closure on the other side. Barbells. Barbells, they sound like what they are, which is a barbell. They're a post piece of jewelry with a ball on both sides. The ends can be, or often referred to as ends, they can be different styles and different types of threading. And we'll get into that later. So stick around, we'll get into it. Anyway, barbells come in kind of 3 main categories. There is standard barbell, which is a straight line barbell. Curved barbell, which is shaped basically a quarter turn, kind of like a banana. That's why at one point in time they were called banana barbells for some reason. Circular barbells. Circular barbells are shaped like a ring with 2 ends usually matching at the bottom. There are other types like surface barbells, which are shaped kind of like this, and they're designed for surface-to-surface piercings, which is not something I advise, but they do exist. Rings. Just like what the name sounds like, it's a circular piece of jewelry, usually a complete circle. Though, on some of them, they're cut out and some aren't. There's various different closures. And here are some of the most common ones. Catty bead ring. Catty bead ring is a circle with a section cut out of it in a ball, which usually has dimples or indentations on both sides. Sometimes they're drilled straight through. That locks into the ring. Those are catty bead rings. Thus, the ring is holding the ball or bead captive. Sometimes they're called captive ball rings. They're basically the same thing. Ball usually means metal, opposed to beads, meaning it can be just about anything, from semi-precious stones or semi-precious materials to rocks, plastic, all kinds of stuff. Fixed bead rings. Fixed bead rings means, or often called beaded rings, means that it is a complete circle, and where the catty bead would normally be, there's a ball that is connected on one side, so it's one solid piece. And to change it, you have to slightly pull it apart and twist it like a corkscrew. Those are fixed bead or beaded rings. Seamless rings. Seamless rings are just, it's kind of a misleading term, seamless, because they have a seam. Basically, they're a ring, a circular piece of wire that bends and kind of connects together in one spot. Usually at the seam, the better pieces of jewelry will have a rounded end on one end and an indentation on the other, so they kind of lock into place. Those are seamless rings. Nostril screws. Nostril screws are a Pacific style jewelry used for nostril piercings. They kind of are shaped like a question mark bent in half. They have a straight section, and then it takes a 90-degree angle, curves around, kind of like a U, that sits inside your nose. The flat part of the circular part sitting inside your nose, or sitting inside the piercing, and then that curvature sitting on the inside of your nose so that it doesn't fall out. Those are called nostril screws. Plugs. Plugs are usually a solid piece of material. It can be everything from metal to plastics to semi-precious stone to glass to hardwoods. I knew there was something else that could be made of. Various different materials, usually designed for earlobe piercings that are being stretched. Some people refer to these as my gauges, but they aren't. They're called a plug. The difference between plugs and other piercings is plug is a solid piece of material. There are no hollowing out or added things to it. So it's called a plug. It's one solid piece. Now that moves us on to eyelets. Eyelets are a tube-like plug, just like a plug, but they usually have a section in the center that is hollow, so you can see through it. There's various different styles with this. There's the flange style, there's the screw-on style, and there is the O-ring style. It all depends on the closure. With the thread-on style, it basically has a disc that unthreads on one side and threads back on. It's probably the most secure of the three. The flanged ones, which I'll get more into flange, you have to stretch the piercing beyond its actual length to get the jewelry in, and then that extra space kind of holds it in place. Then there is the O-rings. O-rings are rubber bands, a very, very small rubber band that fits usually in kind of a groove on the back of it. So that's eyelets in some of the more basic styles. Hangers. Hangers are a very specific piece of jewelry that kind of goes in and out of style. Hangers are usually jewelry that hangs from the piercing. There's no physical closure. They're usually oddly shaped like S's and really detailed clef notes and etc. Kind of that flowing kind of thing. And they usually have kind of a hook section on one side that fits into the piercing. They're called hangers for that reason, because they just hang there. There's nothing physically making sure they're not going to fall out. Flanged or flared plugs in eyelets. Flange are pieces of jewelry usually also used for ear piercings or earlobe piercings when they're stretched. And if you looked at them sideways, they are shaped flat in the center and then curve outward like so. So they're kind of like a capital I with kind of a curvature on both sides turned on its side. The main disadvantage to them is that often the flange, the outer part, is a gauge or two larger than the part that actually sits inside the ear. So if you are slowly increasing the thickness of your jewelry or stretching, you have to force that thing in there, stretch it beyond where its elasticity hits, and then force it in there as much as you can to get it past that flange. It's why I generally do not suggest stretching ears with flanged jewelry. The other disadvantage is even if you get it in there and everything's correct and you've done it right and it's a correct gauge and it goes in really easy, is the easier they go in, the easier they fall out. So flanged jewelry tends to fall out a lot, and that's what I'm getting at. Okay, so I'm almost done with the edit and realized I totally forgot about retainers. Retainers are a style of jewelry that is designed to retain or keep the piercing open during medical procedures or for some reason like either athletic event or employment. You can't wear what you normally wear on the jewelry. A lot of people have the kind of misconception that it's going to somehow hide the piercing. Reality is generally it doesn't. If you're going to keep jewelry in a piercing, both ends of that jewelry is going to be exposed to some degree. It really doesn't matter if that's a plastic end or a little piece of metal sticking out of there. If for example, for employment, you're required to remove all your jewelry, facial jewelry especially, it's going to be just as visible and you're probably going to get in trouble. However, if you have a sporting event that's going to require some restriction on your face and maybe your ears, putting in a lower profile piece of jewelry is going to be better because it's not going to get damaged as easily. The other thing is with medical procedures, often they will require that you remove any type of they're going to require that you remove any type of metallic or metal jewelry that may conduct electricity or may be magnetic. Now, they've kind of opened up like what's magnetic because they'll pretty much flat out tell you no metal. Even though body piercing jewelry is not attracted to magnets, they will still make you take it out regardless. So something made of a material that isn't going to be either of those things, like for example, your best option is glass, will keep the piercing open, but you don't have to worry about electrical current, or it showing up on x-rays and etc., as much so as a metallic piece of jewelry would be. So, and they come in a lot of different shapes, and some of them are designed specifically for specific piercings. For example, nostril screws, they can come in bioplastics, acrylics, and even glass. Septum retainers, same way. They're kind of like a square-shaped or staple-shaped piece of material. They can come in metal also. We kind of go back to like the standard styles, and they pretty much follow the same kind of style size or style type as barbells. There's Labret Studs, there is the curved ones, and the straight ones, and that's about it. They do make some rings sometimes in these materials, but they're not very durable, and they tend to be a bit on the fragile side. I'm not a big fan of plastics and bioplastics being in your body for long periods of times. So generally what I suggest is if you are going to be having a situation where you're going to have the jewelry out and not have metal jewelry and a piercing for a long period of time, you're better off with glass. But that's retainers, kind of an overview. So you've learned another word and what it means. Back to DaVo. I said I was going to talk about threading, so we'll do that to finish things out. Threading. When we're talking about threading, we're talking about jewelry, usually of a barbell style or Labret stud, something that has ends on it that either unscrew or are threadless. There's two styles of threaded jewelry. There is externally threaded and internally threaded. External is threading that is on the post section that actually goes through the piercing. Internally threaded is threading that the post section has been tapped, there's been threading put into it, and then there's threading coming off the ball or in that threads into the post. So basically what it comes down to is screws and bolts. With externally threaded, the jewelry or the post section is a screw that threads into the actual end. Internally threaded, the ball or end is a screw that threads into the post. So that's the difference between those two. Now to make things a little bit more complicated, there's threadless jewelry. Man, I have problems with that word today. I don't know, threadless. Threadless, like it says, doesn't have any threading on it. The way it works is there's a piece of wire, usually there's kind of a thicker piece at the very end, that you bend slightly, and the pressure of that bend against, kind of like a spring, against the inside of the post holds it in place. The post itself is in fact hollow in most cases, which kind of messes with the durability a little bit. The advantage to it is that you can do piercings very, very quickly. The ends are fairly interchangeable, but often when you're removing the jewelry, it does require a tool or tiny itty bitty little fingers to get into whatever section whatever piercing that jewelry's in. So that's everything. And that's one is in the can and over with. That would be the third episode of Body Piercing Basics. The third one covering vocabulary, this one on jewelry. We're going to have more of these in the future. I'll be posting these hopefully on a weekly basis. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up. If something I said has triggered some additional questions or conversation, please leave a comment. I love to talk about things. I love to inform, and I love to be informed. So please do so. If you would like to see more of these in the future, please hit the notification bell and subscribe. Till next time, this is DaVo signing off.